So this video here is not a call to action. I really don't know what the proper solution is. I just know what we're doing now is not the correct one. So this is from the official UKIP account of the UK Independence Party. UKIP candidate Carl Benjamin's team ran Carl UKIP. Carl UKIP was his like political campaign account. Again, not run by him, run by his campaign. On his behalf, yet we find that Twitter has suddenly suspended the account. This is a gross display of electoral interference. Why is your company interfering in UK elections? Now this is an issue where, again, I don't know the proper solution to this. I just want to point out the very obvious problem here. Because as we see, like, where do we exactly draw the line? The problem with terms of service. I just want to bring up the issue with the terms of service. As we've seen, like, if you listen to, there's a good Joe Rogan with Tim Pool and Jack Dorsey going through the individual, like how are you banning these people? And I did a video on that back then and just pointed out my biggest issue is it's not even that. Like, if you decide you're going to ban people up to the point that they are now, that you're going to ban people for certain views, for certain, like if you want to ban people for child pornography, okay. If you want to ban people for threats, like direct threats of violence, okay. That's something objective. That's something we can say this is, like, I know there might be a tiny gray area when it comes to calls for violence, but for the most part, we know where to draw that line, right? We can, there's a common sense involved there where we can draw the line. The problem is, they've expanded to a point where they have hundreds and hundreds of people going through these different tweets and things that have been reported and finding out which accounts deserve to be suspended, which accounts deserve just a warning, which accounts are fine, and things like that. And the problem is there is an obvious human error bias in there. And if we rely entirely on an algorithm, we know algorithms aren't perfect. We know with YouTube, all kinds of videos will get flagged. Even with people on Twitter have said multiple times, like, hey, my account suddenly disappeared. Why is that? It was suddenly suspended. And Twitter will come back and say, oh, I apologize, it was a mistake. This is a big platform, and I think the issue here is, I don't even say, like, let's say it's not even malice. Like, okay, let's put that aside. It could be, it probably is, and I think it is. But let's say it's not out of malice, that there's this obvious bias here. There's a problem. There's an obvious problem here. That there's a one-sided thing. There's human error. This is something that cannot be done. Like, this is the biggest issue with censorship, is that it just cannot, like, if you're for, and again, whether you want to call it censorship or not, like, that's up to you. I'm not going to get into that now. That's not the point. That's directed onto something else. But the problem with deciding, like, taking such a big step of, okay, this is allowed, this isn't allowed, this is allowed, if you start expanding to things that are much more subjective, like, especially in the realm of politics, that's where it becomes an issue, because it just can't work. It cannot work. Like, even if you go in this with the best of intentions and you say, I'm going to be fair and non-biased and I'm not going to have a political agenda to push, even if you do that, it's still not going to work because, again, human error. Like, you can ban some of the basic things that we all agree are an issue. Like, again, direct calls for violence. That's something you can look at a tweet and say, okay, that's probably, like, look at the context. And that's what they always say. Whenever you say, why was someone banned? They say, well, I'll have to look at the context. Well, okay, look at the context, and you can tell if that was a direct threat. Now, if it's not, then you move on. But when it comes to stuff like this, what Twitter's trying to do, they're moving on way too far. They're taking things that just can't, they're trying to implement a system that even if you were totally non-biased, I don't think can be done properly. And that's why people are complaining, because the terms of service are not objective. The terms of service are very vague, and that allows people to say, okay, it applies in this situation, but even though we're applying it equally in this situation, it doesn't apply for some reason that we've decided because of context. It doesn't make any sense. It's something way too complicated. So this brings up the issue with election interference. Let's say, like, just for the sake of this video, let's say that Carl Benjamin, known as Sargon, if you're not sure who that is, let's say for the sake of this argument that he was rightfully banned. Like, just for the sake of this, let's say he was rightfully banned for whatever he said. Now, I'm still not entirely sure what it was, like what specific tweet. I've heard some people say it was this, other people say it was this. I'm not entirely sure. I think they did clarify it on that Joe Rogan episode. Visha clarified, but again, how much can you trust her, for one? And two, I don't know. I forget. It's been a while. But let's say for the sake of this argument, he was rightfully banned. Where do we go from here? Now, can you rightfully ban an account that pretends, that is in a sense associated with him, but we know it's not run by him? Or at least all we personally can really say is it's probably not run by him. All we have to do is go by his own word, but that's something that Twitter can see. Like, that's something that Twitter can find out if it was run by him or not. In fact, I do believe he is on Twitter currently under, like, a pseudonym, and like, we're pretty confident that it is him. Other people think it's him, and it does seem to be him, but yeah, that one's not banned. So I don't know exactly their process of going to look. I don't know if it's by IP. I assume it's by IP addresses. But then again, a VPN can circumvent that, I believe. So who knows? But that brings up the question of if this account was not run by him, and it's a political campaign. So for one, it's not like he is running on a party that he invented 10 seconds ago, or he's running as an independent, and he's just some dude and he's going to get 8 votes. That's one thing. But it's another thing when you're running a party. I'll admit, UKIP's not a major party. It's what, number 4, number 5, but it's doing surprisingly well in the polls. So this is something that you can't discount. This is if someone's gaining, if a party is doing that good in the polls. There's a certain limit there. If you're doing better than 2, 3, which last I checked, I think they were doing 9, 10% in the polls. I think that's high enough where you can say, okay, you shouldn't. They're well accepted among the public enough that you can't start going around and banning their accounts. And especially this guy. This is a guy that is greatly loved and greatly appreciated by tons of people, and that brings up the question of, okay, if this many people like him, who are you to kind of step in and say, okay, this guy is not deemed safe for the internet? And of course, that brings up the question of there are loads of pretty awful people on the internet, loads of hateful people on the internet, and yet we're banning this guy. So it's arbitrary, and that brings up the question of election interference. Again, private company, sure. If a company, we see Ben & Jerry's, is Ben & Jerry's election interference because they back Bernie? I don't think so. Companies can interfere. People can interfere in elections, interfere in the sense that they can contribute. And I suppose Twitter's obviously probably donating tons of money to certain political campaigns, so that does bring up the question of, is it entirely wrong in that sense for them to exert their influence? But that's something we need to, at the very least, acknowledge, that this is a big, powerful organization here that can just start deleting people and can obviously shift things in a certain direction. It's like with Google messing up search results. Do they have that right? That's a whole separate question. But at the very least, we need to acknowledge that companies like Google and Twitter here have that power. They have a lot of influence here. They decide who is seen in the public eye. So once they start deleting political accounts, that becomes a question. Because if you're in politics like that, if you're a big party in politics, that means that people want you. That means that people accept you. That a large portion of the population sees what you're doing as good for society and wants you involved in society. So that brings up the question of, again, if you're going to start deciding okay, well, this person's too radical or that, you're picking your own political candidates. And it becomes an extra iffy question when it comes down to, okay, this account was not run by him. It was run by his campaign. They made sure, according to him at least, they made sure he did not touch it. So again, where do you draw that line? Maybe your policies are a bit too excessive when you're banning major political party candidates. But then again, should we give politicians the free reign to should we give politicians some kind of special privilege in the sense that, oh, they can't get banned, politicians can't? I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I typically agree with across the board of let everyone speak, take the truly awful things offline, the things that are illegal, the direct calls to violence. Other than that, let it be a free for all. I think it's more it's not even that is the moral choice. It's that is the choice that is best pragmatically, because the system they're trying to implement cannot be done fairly. And the big question there is fairness. Again, I see all these people saying oh, well, he broke the rules. It's as we've kind of established, the rules are pretty dang arbitrary, and that's the issue. That's something about the rule of law that makes the law system great. I know certain libertarians and more ANCAP viewers might disagree with me, but the rule of law is a thing that even some libertarians see as a legitimate thing. That's a legitimate process because it is trying to be objective. In some cases, it's not objective, unfortunately. Some judges rule on some things, and there's going to be flaws here and there. But at least they acknowledge, okay, there's some objectivity here. We can rely on past legislation. We can rely on past rulings to kind of come up with an objective legal system that tries to apply across the board. And I know that system's majorly flawed. Maybe it needs an overhaul. Maybe it needs redone. Maybe we need something different. That's a different question. But the point of at least the law itself is seen as, if you're going to govern people, you need an objective system. You need clear-cut rules. You need a way to look at a rule and say, okay, what does this mean? And that's what the originalists, textualists argue that okay, we're going to rely on what the words mean, not necessarily what they were intended to mean, or we can rely on what the words intended to mean back at that time. But at the very least, the thing about law is, again, I'm not speaking from experience. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a law student. I've read 3 books on law or 4 books on law. Not much at all. But at least when it comes to law, they have an objective system. They try to establish, or at the very least you can say they're trying to establish an objective system. Whereas these major accounts, they are in a sense governing a major platform like that. Now, if there's 10 people in an account, there's 10 people in a social media platform, that's rather easy to govern. It's kind of like socialism in the sense that if you do it in the scale of the family, then sure, that might work. If you have kind of like a collectivist, a commune in the sense of a single family, yeah, that can work. But once you expand to millions and millions of people, the thing quickly falls apart and people start dying. So this is a less dramatic, Twitter is not as dramatic as socialism, in the sense that people don't die with Twitter. But we can say that you need some kind of objective rules when you're going across this big of a system. When you're going to start applying rules, we need something more objective here. And that's the whole point of this video, is to try to raise this issue. That we need some kind of, you need to be fair. You need to have some kind of objective system, or you're going to start running into problems like this of a possible election interference, of picking favorites and choosing stuff. Because it seems to be that from the perspective of people that run YouTube and Google and Twitter and that, there is such thing as you just put out what is popular. Like, you let what is popular rise to the top of the algorithm. That is that is what happens. That is the natural state of things. An algorithm that takes what is popular or what is successful and puts it to the top. But then they start interfering. They say, well, we don't want certain conspiracy theories to show up on the front page, or we're going to start recruiting conspiracy theorists, or we don't want to do this. And I understand that is a legit problem there, in the sense that, ISIS has used Twitter to recruit people. That is true. ISIS has relied on Twitter to recruit people. Loads of awful organizations have relied on social media platforms to recruit people, and that's something they have to deal with. Like, if you're someone that creates an organization that terrorists are using to spread their ideology, that's something that's pretty hard to live with without saying, okay, I want to get involved. So I don't even necessarily blame them for getting involved. But even then, if terrorists are recruiting for their platform, okay, we can say if an organization is established as a terrorist organization by X many countries, okay, you don't even want to say by the UN or by one country. If it's by X many countries, if it's by 60 different countries, okay, that's a good enough threshold to say it's probably awful. Or we can say it's a terrorist organization if they do proudly declare themselves as advocates of what would be considered terrorism, of violence to spread a political message. Okay, then you can say we can ban that. But when it gets to things like this, where we're going to ban people for certain things they say, when we're going to ban people, we're going to ban political pages that aren't run by them, that's when it becomes an issue. Because if it was run by him, okay, he got himself banned from Twitter. I can at least kind of see the argument there. You got yourself banned, now you're running for a campaign, but you can't have your own account just because you're running for a campaign. But then the issue becomes, again, he's not running this account. UKIP's running this account. Other people are running this account. And sure, they're running it in his name, but they're representing his campaign. And a campaign is not just a single person. So that's where the big issue is. And I really don't know the solution. Otherwise, I don't really know the solution besides it's just not going to work. It's just you can't expect to apply something like this across the board and be fair. So it's best to just not try it. It's just not going to work. That's all I can really say. But again, this is something that even if you fully acknowledge that, yeah, Twitter has the right to do everything they want. Okay, you can acknowledge that. You can that's fine. But then the point is, there is a clear problem here, and how do we fix it? Where do we go from here? This is clearly something that is an issue, and where is the solution? Of when it comes to okay, a big organization deciding, well, this campaign doesn't fit our terms of service, this campaign doesn't fit our terms of service, and if you say that they have every right to post whatever they want, they have every right to ban whoever they want. If you decide that, okay, you have a major platform, can they suddenly decide? Can they literally just come out and say, okay, we are going to ban people that associate with Republican values or Democrat values? Can they ban an entire party like that? Could they ban UKIP's account tomorrow? And even if you acknowledge they have that right, we at least acknowledge there's a problem. And that's what I want to get across. There is a problem. There is a problem there. And first, to be perfectly honest, I'm not even fans of regulation because, as we see, you're just not going to get it. And that's my personal opinion here. If you say you want regulation, well, who's going to write the regulation that regulates Twitter? Probably Twitter. Probably Twitter's going to have some say in that. Big corporations. The big corporations are going to be the ones writing their own censorship laws. I don't think it's possible to with all the energy you could put behind advocating and fighting for some kind of actual good legislation that would possibly ensure free speech on the internet, with all the fight that you can do for that, I just think your energies are better channeled elsewhere, because as soon as you get the government involved, well, then that's crony capitalism. Then government's going to start, as soon as the government decides that, well, like, say one party's in power and the Twitter begins banning for the other political party, do you really think they're going to step in and say, oh, that's a problem? No, they're going to say they're going to capitalize on it. So it's just my pessimism of government is, even if you regulate it, the people that are regulating it are not the people you want regulating it. But the whole point of this was to point out that this has happened, and you have to acknowledge there's a problem. And really, the only solution I see is to just acknowledge that there's a problem and say, okay, like it's impossible to regulate this. It's impossible to for Twitter to regulate a platform on the scale that they are in such an arbitrary way, and that there needs to be a rule system. And maybe that's something, I don't know how people lobby Twitter to do that. Maybe that's something that's the appropriate route. But I'm just here to point out the problem, because that's the thing. I don't have all the answers. I don't have a solution, but I can point out a problem when I see one, and I can point out when a company has major influence like this, and when there's something that, when the lines are a bit blurred here of, okay, someone got banned for saying something. It wasn't for like political opinions or something. It was banned for saying something offensive. So when you know that he has, they're banning an account that's associated with him, associated with the campaign, but it's not run by him, like, that's something where you have to draw the line. And I think that the line is drawn way too far than where it should be. It should be scaled back massively, because you can't run this fairly. Like, this is not going to be fair. And we've already seen, like, there are loads of examples where someone can go out and directly call for violence and be fine. Like, someone can call for doxing children, as Kathy Griffin did, called for the, she wanted the kids' names. She wanted to put their names out in public, and there was the tweet about she wanted to put these the Covington Catholic kids through a wood chipper, and apparently that's fine. Like, there's an obvious problem here, and the issue is it's not even like I'm just advocating for some kind of objective rules here. That's what we need, because if we don't have if these major companies are not applying something equally across the board, then we're going to see issues. Then that's a big problem we have to deal with. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments section. Like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe for more. If you agree, let me know why. If you disagree, let me know why. If there's something you have to add, let me know in the comments. And thanks for watching.